Good evening. I'd like to call this regular business meeting of the Loveland Board of Education to order at 6:03 p.m. and ask our treasurer, Mr. Hawley, for a roll call.
Mr. Doherty,
Here.
Dr. Lorenz,
I'm here.
Ms. Pettit,
Here.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Present.
Just for the audience to know, we are present in the cafeteria of the Loveland Middle School. We have two board members who are attending the meeting virtually. The whole meeting is on a Zoom webinar, but we have two members who are not here in the room with us. Michelle Pettit and Kevin Doherty are off-site and attending virtually. We will do our best to keep everything muted, unmuted when it needs to be as we move through the meeting. And I would ask at this point for a motion to adopt the agenda. I see Mrs. Washburn. Do I have a second? I see Ms. Pettit. So, are there any questions about the agenda? It was posted on Board Docs, again, for our audience members. It is available on the Loveland website, so you can see the meeting agenda. Any questions or discussion about the agenda? Mr. Doherty.
Yeah, just a question for John Lape. I'm watching the link from the school board page, and I don't see the Zoom started as yet. Are we sure that we're broadcasting?
We show that we're recording, but I don't know that we're broadcasting. Let's take a moment and check and make sure that we are broadcasting. Okay, we are live and we are also streaming, is that correct? Okay, looks like I've gotten confirmation that we are streaming. Again, for purposes of the audience who is listening to us, we are here in the middle school cafeteria. We have two board members who are attending remotely. That is Michelle Pettit and Kevin Doherty. We have been recording since the beginning of the meeting. We have already called to order, so that will be available in the recording. Anyone who is coming into the recording right now or coming into the live stream right now. We have opened the meeting and we have pending a motion to adopt the agenda for this evening. We had no discussion, so Mr. Hawley, can we vote on adopting the agenda?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit, Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
We did not hear Ms. Pettit, but I did see her indicate voting yes, so we have all voting yes and that motion carried. Once again, I will welcome our guests this evening and ask you to, let's see, we will stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Those of us who are here in the room will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag
of the
the United States of America and to the republic
for
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty and
and
justice
justice
for all.
for all. Kathy,
Thank you. I will make note also for the public that we have administrators present here in the room. Kevin, Mr. Doherty.
yeah, just a clarification for the public. I see we've got 15 in the Zoom. Just a clarification, this is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. YouTube copy of the meeting will be available even though we're not streaming on YouTube tonight. You can only watch it through the Zoom link tonight, but YouTube will have a copy of the meeting posted subsequently.
Okay, thank you. I was going to announce that we had our student representatives here, but we do not have our student representatives here this evening. We are going to be waiting for our building reports for next month between everything that has happened with the virus, everything that has happened over the holidays, over the break, and getting everybody back to school. We'll have those reports as usual next month. We do have a section here for hearing of the public. Again, for the public who is watching us on the Zoom link, we do not have anyone present here who has asked to speak to the public. I thought that what I would do is report the communications that the board has received since January 5th. No one has asked for those communications to be read or entered into the record for a hearing of the public, but we have received 6 or 7 emails regarding opening school after winter break, about hybrid versus 5-day, about the length of the school day. So those were all questions, comments, suggestions about how we would do school. That was the kind of communication we got about that. We did have one communication asking about our organizational meeting and status of meetings and recordings and minutes. We had one email regarding fiduciary questions. We had an email regarding social media as regards to use by district staff. And we had communications from executive search firms regarding our superintendent opening. So those are the communications that we've received as a board. Again, we do not have anyone who has asked to join us for hearing of the public this evening. All right, the first item on the agenda is School Board Recognition Month. You will find at your desk a certificate that says we're school board members and we're appreciated. And I believe that there is a video. Is that
Yes.
correct, Ms. Connor?
Yes, that is correct. Every January is designated by the Ohio School Board Association as School Board Appreciation Month, and I'm going to share my screen here and just share with all of you a video that was prepared just from some of our staff across the district, and just letting everyone know how much we appreciate the time that you sacrifice to make certain that we are able to have school in a successful manner with our students. So I'm going to work on getting my share screen. So my host disabled my share screening, so I'm going to need to have rights to be able to do that. I promise I'm building excitement for it. That's what I'm doing. Okay. Okay. I apologize for not sure why I'm taking you to that, but let's see if we got it here. I can hear it. Can you hear him? Okay, so they're saying some very nice things. And clearly we're having trouble in the cafeteria being able to hear this. So perhaps do we have a workaround on this, or is this something we need to share with the Board of Education at a later time?
What if you were to unplug your headset and allow the speaker, and maybe we get a microphone near the speaker? This is good practice because at some point we want to be able to play videos that come in from outside, and we haven't been able to be comfortable in how to do it just yet. So this is a good trial run.
Yes, it is.
I'm thinking just keep it super simple, play it through your laptop speakers
I
and
certainly can. I'm not sure if I need, maybe I can carry over here, and perhaps that would help.
then somebody's mic who isn't on mute.
Here we-
Here- Yeah,
Well, can they hear it that way?
still no go. Andrew is still not getting sound.
Let me unmute this microphone.
That probably would help, wouldn't it?
Is it on this? No.
Yeah.
Keep the meeting going and we'll try to figure this all out.
That's gracious.
That's right.
Yep. So best laid plans.
We'll do it later.
We'll
Wait.
this email later and move on with the meeting. Apologize. I promise it's awesome. Everybody just wanted to let everyone know how much they appreciate your sacrifice of your time. So
We appreciate being appreciated. I'm reverberating now.
Again, for the public, I don't know that we deserve as much time as we were taking there, but it's an important little piece of technology for us to figure out how to do. So bear with us.
Well, we had some practice and we'll practice some more. And so the next time when we have a video that really is crucial that the public see, we will be ready to do that. And we do appreciate the effort that went into showing that we're appreciated. We do this because we appreciate the staff and the students of Loveland School District. So we thank you very much for that. We will move on. I will note that in our reports, we have administrator reports. Those are available in board docs. They are not something that we generally discuss this evening, but simply reports that have come to us to help us do the business of the evening. We would generally have student representative to the board reports. As we mentioned, we'll be having those next month. And then we come to 3.3, which is board member reports. I do have a report, but I don't know if other board members do. I know that Mrs. Washburn and Dr. Swetchenow will be reporting as we move into the Business Advisory Council item. So maybe we could hold that until we see if there are any other reports. Ms. Pettit.
I have a report. That's all. I was trying to tell you I have one. Did you not hear me?
Kathy, you're muted.
Okay, Michelle, do you have a report? Okay, would you go ahead and
Okay. Kevin Doherty and I met with John Ames for a facilities update where John Ames had shared an overview of what was discussed. Yeah, of course, I'm going to show. Anyway, I'm going to share the overview of what was discussed. The Microsoft licensing strategy is where we had expected some cost reductions from a plan to eliminate Microsoft Office and focus on Google alternatives. Current Microsoft pricing structure is targeted at Windows licenses and therefore necessary and bundles much of the Microsoft suite of applications, favors staying with Microsoft from a cost perspective. John has been discussing the roof repairs at the different buildings coming into different sections at a time. And that involves a purchasing of a group approach to purchasing of the materials and installation versus the individual bids that we used to historically. That's how we used to do it with the individual bids. However, the group approach is common industry practice nowadays. And then he's been working on a paving plan for all the different pavements. Also, there is a technology update. We are moving from interactive projectors to interactive monitors. This both saves cost and significantly upgrades the options for teacher and student interaction. They will be being replaced as the old ones break. We will then replace it with the new monitors. So I think it's going to be exciting for the kids to have that opportunity with those monitors. And that's it.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other board member reports? Mr. Doherty?
Eric, were you going to talk about the Finance Committee at all? Only thing I had, in addition to being in the finance and the facilities that I think are covered elsewhere, is that we have drafted up some updates to the board website. It's in each board member's hands right now for review, and we just need to eventually make a decision to move forward with those relatively minor but helpful changes, anticipating that when we have a new superintendent, we'll have a more robust discussion about the overall website architecture and presentation and deal with that later on. Eric, were you going to do finance? That's all I had, Kathy.
Okay,
Kevin-
thanks, Mr. Doherty. Dr. Swetchenow.
I was waiting for the reverb to stop. Kevin and John Ames and I met as part of the Finance Committee. And we really reviewed 4 different items. One was a 5-year forecast and previous 5-year forecasts and projections for upcoming 5-year forecasts and where they varied. One was the CUP report data that's available to us through the state of Ohio, comparing ourselves to other similar and local school districts as far as benchmarking costs and expenses. The other 2 subjects that we talked about have been the constant theme, and the one is the upcoming negotiation with the certified staff and just making sure that we understand appropriate benchmarking for salary schedule and salary structure. And then the last thing that we discussed was administrative employee benefits. And again, making sure that we can benchmark those against our local area to ensure that the benefits that we're offering our administrators are in par with other local school districts. So those are really the topics of our discussion.
Thank you. Mrs. Washburn, do you have anything other than the Planning Commission report? Because we can.
Kathy is muted again.
And I'm trying to unmute. I have a small report other than the communications that we have. I do have a Great Oaks report, simply to say that because they cannot have personal tours to the different campuses, they have created a great online tool, and they have virtual tours of every program that they offer at Great Oaks, and they really are well done. So if you're interested in becoming an electrician, or you're interested in culinary arts, you can visit any of the programs that they have, and obviously recommend them. They are for students who are considering Great Oaks for their junior and senior years, but they're just great programs to look at, so I'd recommend them. I also wanted to report as we move into the next item, which is to appoint a board member to the Business Advisory Council, that it was my understanding at the last meeting when we discussed board committee structure that we would continue to have just those representatives that we mentioned last time, the representatives to the tax increment and to the CIC, and the recreation and planning and zoning representatives, and that the only board representative that we would elect would be the board representative who goes to the Business Advisory Council. The other information that I heard, and I would like us to put it in the minutes so there's a record of it, is that the board members who will be attending the administrative committee meetings that we have would be for facilities, Michelle and Kevin; for finance, Kevin and Eric; for policy, Michelle and myself; and for student experience, Eileen. Do I have those correct? So we'll put those in the minutes as being, those are the board members who have volunteered to attend those meetings. But what I would ask for at this point is a motion to appoint, and I believe it's a motion to appoint Eileen Washburn to the Business Advisory Council. So I will make that motion. Is there a second? I saw Mr. Doherty raise his hand. Is that all right? So it was me making the motion and Mr. Doherty seconding. Mrs. Washburn, do you accept that appointment to that committee?
I enthusiastically accept that appointment.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Any discussion? Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes?
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes. Motion carried. We're then going to move into discussion about the board commitments survey feedback that we got. And I want to thank Mr. Doherty. I want to thank first Mrs. Connor for helping us get that survey out, and Julie Dunn in the office who helped us get that survey set up and out to the public. I want to thank Mr. Doherty for taking some of the information and organizing it in a way that, put it together a little bit better. I would like to simply report that we had, let me see if I can find my numbers here. We had, well, hopefully I can remember what they are. We had 530 responses to the survey, which is good. We would like to have more, of course. We have several thousand families in the district, and we have probably that many staff members. So we did not receive responses from the number that perhaps we would like, but we had 530 responses. We had the majority from parents and staff. We did have 32 responses from people who identified themselves as only community members, not having students in school, not being a member of the Loveland City School District staff. I think that when we look at the responses, we see some differences between the staff and the parent and the community member response, which we certainly want to consider. But I also think that the number of community responses means that we need to continue our efforts to solicit community input, that we perhaps didn't reach enough people, perhaps did not set up the survey in a way that was engaging to those who wanted to respond. We thank certainly all the people who responded, but recognize that we still need to get some community input. My personal reading of the first reading of the data is that there's a lot to consider. As in almost every survey that we do, there's some data that came back that's conflicting. So some people say they understand a certain statement, other people say they don't understand it. Some people say they agree wholeheartedly with a statement, other people say they have questions about the statement, they have changes. And so I think that we need to take more time to study this information. I would just like to comment on the frequent mention of three things. It was mentioned frequently that these commitments that we have proposed or that we have used, and we are proposing again, lack a how do you do that or a measure of the commitment. And I would simply answer that by saying that this document is not the document that shows how we do it or measures how well we did it. This is a document that is a commitment that says we will do our best to do something. We have other pieces. The reason we're working on approving this commitment document is that we create other pieces that go with it that are the assessment piece, that are the how do we do it, the programs that work with it. So I don't know that we need to address that issue because it's addressed elsewhere. There were many mentions of a suggestion that we pay attention to what we've learned during the pandemic, things such as flexibility, technological opportunities and things that we have done. And so certainly I think that's a really good piece of advice for us, that we consider what has gone well in the pandemic. I also don't see that as changing the commitments materially. Then there was another several mentions of saying that we did not in these commitments talk a lot about staff support and staff development. And I guess my answer to that is that we could consider getting that into our commitments, but that these are essentially commitments of what we, the district, will do for our students. And so that's why there's not a large mention of what we do for staff. But certainly as we go forward in the future, we might consider how we include staff support there. All of that being said, there were lots of suggestions. There were lots of questions about words. And so I would ask the other board members what they have seen as they've seen this report as well. And then we'll have a discussion on how to move forward with these commitments.
You're muted, Kathy, if you're.
Unmute button. There we
Okay.
go. I am now unmuted. Mr. Doherty.
Yeah, just to expand a little bit on Kathy's comments. Those 530 respondents generated by my rough count, something in the neighborhood of 1,200 individual comments. So there's a lot of information here to digest. There's a scoring difference. For those of you that took the survey, you'll know that there was a scale. I think it's from 1 to 5 of expressing alignment with the statement. So a high number indicates that you agree that that statement is reflective of where we should be targeting ourselves in essence, and a low number says you kind of disagree with that. And if you look at it overall, all comments equally weighted, all respondents equally weighted, it was about a 4, give or take a 4.2 or something, which would indicate pretty good alignment. But if you break the survey respondents between essentially those that have kids, parents, et cetera, parents and staff that have kids in the district, and staff as one group, because they have tended in this survey to express similar perspectives, versus those that don't have kids in the district, and that's about 6% or so of respondents. Those with kids and staff generally scored about a 4 to a 4.5 in alignment. So they, as a group, generally agreed pretty well with what was in the existing document. Those without kids in the district were 3.5 on average. So that's a fairly significant difference of viewpoint between one group and the other. The smaller group, the ones that didn't have kids in the district, nevertheless were highly respondent. So roughly 2/3 of those folks made comments on essentially all the bullet points, compared with maybe about a quarter or so of those others who had kids in the district or staff. So they were opinionated, and they shared their opinions on each of these. And I believe, consistent with Kathy's observation, we do need to consider all this feedback. All the feedback is valuable to us, and we should take it into consideration, especially as we embark on the superintendent search. A lot of these comments might actually reflect more on things that the board should be concerned with, things related to transparency, fiscal policy, and the like. Others clearly relate to educational strategy and educational policy. The superintendent that is yet to be hired, and we'll be talking a lot more about that as we go forward, will have the greatest impact on that. We need to listen real carefully. That person needs to listen real carefully to these comments, but that may be something that comes a little bit later on. That's all that I had, Kathy.
Thank you, Kevin. Anybody else? This was a lot of data that came in essentially yesterday morning. And so it came out to board members yesterday, and there's not a lot of time to go through it. Anything else? Dr. Swetchenow.
Kevin, thanks for diving into that and kind of breaking it up. You certainly had a better chance to break down the data than I did.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that the data that we were able to collect elucidates is the need for a strong channel to reach out to non-school members of our community. We have great ways to reach the school members of our community. We don't have great ways to reach the non-school members of our community. And that's something that I know that we've all talked about trying to move forwards. And I know that we all have some different ideas about how we can best do that. But I think it goes to underscore the nature of the fact that sometimes we don't have a complete picture of what the Loveland community desires as much as a picture of what the Loveland school community desires.
Thanks, Eric. Anyone else? Michelle or Eileen?
Yeah, I think you guys summed it up nicely. And as Kathy said, there's a lot of information to go through. So I've read through some of it, but not all of it yet. So I appreciate everybody who took the time to read through that and offer their feedback. And I look forward to getting through the rest of it.
Okay, so I wonder, this is a document that the board needs to approve. I believe that it would be on the February agenda for approval. And then this is the document that the administrative team uses then to roll out the building goals and the building strategies for the next academic year. And I'm wondering if we can give direction to the administrators to work with the current commitments as they were surveyed. I would, based on something that Kevin echoed, there is one commitment that is more the realm of operation of the board than the others, and that is the fiscal responsibility. The others come more from the administrative team and from the buildings and what they do with students. I'm wondering if the board members would object if either I or anyone else on the board makes an attempt to edit that fiscal responsibility commitment to include something about transparency and communication, something like that. That I don't think that would cause a problem to the buildings as to what they're doing with their strategies. I think it would be more a board commitment. Otherwise, the rest of you could also just say, let's roll the commitments over the way they are and study this further and make changes. So I'd like an opinion so we're ready to bring something back at the February meeting.
Kathy, if I may, there are two commitments on there. One is a communications commitment that is separate from the fiscal one. Are you, just for clarification, are you, as a board, going to look at both of those commitments as two separate pieces, or are you thinking about combining those into one?
My comment was made to the fiscal responsibility and communication concerning fiscal responsibility,
Okay,
as opposed to the communication commitment.
okay,
So it would
okay.
be just the one that I was suggesting, but I haven't heard from the other board members whether they even want to go down that path, but I was just speaking about that one commitment.
Okay, thank you.
I would personally be in favor
Mr.
of a
Doherty.
couple of minor adjustments like that, expressing some of the things that we've talked a lot about during the last 6 months or so. And I think I'd be comfortable for this round to leave most of the educational policy items intact, unless there's something that's really concerning there at the moment.
I didn't catch the first part of what you said. Did you say you want Kathy, to look at the finance part?
Well, I don't know if it would be Kathy in particular, but adjusting, and it's really just making sure that the commitment statement is reflective of the things that we've all been talking about a lot during the last 5 or 6 months. And I think that those can be accomplished through some relatively minor adjustments to the wording. Kathy can do it, or one of the rest of us, Andrea could do it, I'm sure. We all know what we're talking about in that respect, and leaving the bulk of it intact, really because of timing considerations and the fact that we don't have the new superintendent is kind of where I was coming from.
With everyone's permission, I'd be glad to work on something. We could actually bring that fiscal responsibility commitment to the February work session for a few moments of discussion with everyone so that the wording is clear. And then we would have the whole document ready for the February business meeting to approve.
I think that sounds like a good plan. So we're not just moving on with something that we aren't all 100% comfortable with. So if you're willing to look at it,
I would just want to reassure the public that we're reading everything, and we're sensitive to everything that's in there. A single document can't hope to favorably address every single concern that expressed, because we do have to have essentially consensus. But we have heard, and I think we'll all continue to be sensitive to everything that's there.
Thanks, Kevin. And we also would need probably more work with staff and administration were we to try to make any other language changes to the other parts because they were not created in a vacuum. They were not created by the board. They were created in a collaborative kind of effort. And I think that once we have a chance for everyone to go through the data, then we'll have a chance to have that kind of collaborative effort to move forward with changes or new commitments or additional commitments. Sorry, my button keeps. Anything else about commitments before we move on? So I will have a fiscal responsibility commitment for the board to consider at the work session. And otherwise, the commitments will be brought forward at the February business meeting. All right, the other item of, the next item of discussion for the board is the discussion of a DEI statement. I don't know how much the board is prepared to work on this evening. What you had included on the board agenda are the two policies, which I believe the Diversity Advisory Board worked with Dr. Kraus on in December or earlier. And they looked at those policies to see what they already included as a statement for diversity, equity, and inclusion for Loveland schools. You also have a State Board of Education resolution about racism and advancing equity. The purpose of showing all of these things to the board is for us to make a determination, as we have stated from the beginning of this process, to make a determination if we are satisfied that our policies are a sufficient diversity statement, or if this board is going to attempt to create a diversity statement that is separate from that. I believe that the Diversity Advisory Board is recommending that there be a statement, but I do not know if we have gotten to the point yet as a board that we're ready to create that statement. And so we need a process. If we decide to have one, we need a process to create that statement. So discussion, comments.
I don't want to go first here.
Kevin, yeah.
I'll go first if nobody else is going to. So I read through this state document, and I think I reread. It's been a little while, the two policy documents that are out with the agenda, and I felt very good actually about the two policy statements. There's some strong language in there if you read it, and some of it might actually be contentious with some folks. I don't know, but where we say we regularly or annually refresh our awareness of the facts, and that public schools are among the primary instruments for furthering, upgrading, and strengthening human relations and promoting inclusion through professional development. I think that's an incredibly practical and very helpful statement. I was in the business world starting 45 years ago, and inclusion I first heard in the workplace. I first heard from the company that I was working for at the time, and its sensitivity to this subject. So organizations can actually lead a significant amount of change. And I do think from that perspective that schools can be quite effective and quite helpful, and perhaps therefore have a responsibility to be involved in it. And I was, again, thankful to see it worded here. I was also reassured in 2240-01 about our commitment to developing persons who can think critically and understand their culture, et cetera. I think these are noble intents and very appropriate for us to express them. So I feel very good about what we already have. That's not to say that we can't add or do more. I'm not as comfortable with this state document. It's quite extensive and covers it's long, and there's a lot of wording in there that um, I'm a fan of people hearing what we're trying to say, and the way we say things is critical sometimes. And I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with everything that's in here says what would be in our heads and our hearts in a way that everybody would listen to. Um, so I'd be open, very open to hearing from the advisory board um, on two fronts. One being, can we accomplish what we should, do you think, accomplish by adjusting our policy and maybe making it more visible? And if you don't think that that's appropriate, what statement would you think we should consider? Do you like this one from the state? Would you draft something different? I'd certainly be open to hearing uh, from the advisory board, from our parents and others, their feelings on the subject, because it's a major subject in our society today, for sure. I'm done.
Thanks, Kevin. Other comments?
I don't mind chiming in at this point. I was a little confused by the State Board of Education resolution and understanding how that fits into what we are being asked or expected to do. Can anybody clarify that? This is just a statement from the state? Do we need to do anything with that in particular? Are we planning to build a policy around that language, or was just informational that the state has put it out?
I actually just asked that it be included so that the board would know what other entities were doing. So that's the State Board of Education. There is also, I believe I mentioned in discussion, there is a plank in the OSBA platform, which was adopted this past November. Unfortunately, I cannot find that they have published the 2021 platform. I can only find the 2021. So I have not found yet that plank that is published. It is a much shorter one that speaks to the notion that schools have a responsibility to have students think critically, have a responsibility to talk about inclusion. And so that statement might be a shorter one. This was just to try to give as much information to the board as possible as to the kinds of things that are available to talk about diversity and equity and inclusion.
Gotcha. And let me make sure I'm not muted. The second just feedback I had about 2210.03 is I personally had some concerns, and I want to make sure that the administration, I'm sure, can alleviate those concerns about line A, the curriculum for all students in grades pre-K through 12 presents. There's certainly topics in there that aren't necessarily appropriate for pre-kindergartners, kindergartners, and first graders, but the language of the resolution doesn't really address that the administration and curriculum does this in an age-appropriate fashion and what that would look like. Can you give me any feedback about that? Or I know that this is not our formal policy at this point.
So all curriculum is designed to be age appropriate. So I say that to say some of the changes or suggested changes on in here are alignment with proper terminology for transgender, gender identity, those particular pieces. So, but all curriculum that is adopted that we bring to the Board of Education is grade level appropriate.
Is there any reason to ensure that this policy states that, just because it doesn't?
I think
I don't, if that's to be understood,
Mm.
that's okay with me. I am not a big policy person, but the way that this reads does not include that piece of information.
Right.
I don't think there's any reason that the policy could not be adapted to include that age appropriate in some way. We can look at the language, and I think that's a very good point.
Absolutely.
Other than that feedback, I agree that this is a very important issue that has risen to a point in our society that that we need to address it in the schools and that it's important to address it in the schools. And I'm sure we all remember our own childhoods and the, to be blunt, the bigotry of our parents and even of ourselves as we were growing up. And I think that the schools are an important place to make sure that that starts to change.
Agreed. And just reading through the previous language and some of the updates, we have a little tweaking to do as far as adding in some comments here and there. But I think overall that the revisions that we are trying to make are long overdue.
Michelle, did you have anything to add? Okay, thanks. Well, then what I'm hearing, I think, let me make a resume of it, is that we will look at policy 2210.03 and consider adding language that speaks about the age appropriateness, that we will ask I will continue to try to find the plank from the OSBA platform, and that we will contact the Diversity Advisory Board to ask them the questions that were asked here, whether they would give advice to the board as to whether the policies are sufficient, or they would suggest that the board actually come out and make a statement, and if they have any suggested language for a statement, and we can consider that at a future meeting. I don't think this is not a particularly time-sensitive issue. As we all note, this is important, but I don't think this is something that needs to be done by next week, so we can continue to work on it. Does that make sense? All right. Anything else for diversity? Any diverse opinions about diversity? If not, we'll segue right on into policy. And what you have this evening is just first reading of policies, and you have them there. The use of tobacco policies have some very specific changes that have to do with changes in regulations about use of tobacco, definition of tobacco, and advertising and promotion. So those are pretty straightforward, those policies. And so they would come back next month as a second reading to be adopted. The two final policies, 7510 and 9700.01, were policies that came to the policy, were asked to be considered by the policy committee. They came from the ad hoc records committee asking to have these be considered, and they grew out of meetings and things that may have happened or may not have happened during a levy campaign. And so they were specifically, for example, 7510 was specifically revised to add a section that says school premises may not be used for meetings for political purposes that are not open to the public. This was a question that had come up. So that was a change there. And then 9700.01 was asked about concerning advertising of political campaigns. And the reason you have been given, I believe, you may have not been given the administrative guidelines, but the policy is not suggested to be changed. It's just adding some elements to it. And then it is actually in the administrative guidelines that it says, I found it, just a minute. There is in the guidelines, it says no advertisement shall promote any specific religion or religious, ethnic, or racial group, political candidate, or ballot issue. And so those two policies were specifically concerning campaigns. I did happen to notice that we received an email, or at least I did, just prior to the meeting, concerning the adoption of these policies. And I just want to be clear that we are not adopting these policies this evening. It's a first reading. And so I obviously did not have time to read that email before the meeting, but I will certainly look at it and be able to address whether the concerns in that email are addressed in the policies. But that's what these policies are for your first reading. So that's the explanation I have for this evening. I see that Mr. Doherty has a question.
Yeah, Kathy, just two quick points. One on 7510, on the second page, the back page of it, below item G, I think there's a conflict
I-
with another paragraph on fees. I can't hear you, Kathy.
Doherty, do you have a microphone? Your face was turned and I just wasn't hearing you very well. So I
Oh, I'm
wonder if
sorry.
you could repeat.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So below item G in 7510, that first paragraph talks about meetings that will be free of charge. And then below it, what would be 3 paragraphs below it, it charges the superintendent with the task of developing fees. So there's a little bit of a conflict between those 2 paragraphs I think we would want to address. That's one comment. And then the second comment is about the, I forget what you call it, but this criteria for commercial messages, 9,000 relations. Is that visible to the public? And if it's not, why would it not be going forward? Because I think, the statement, the part of it that you read is important for people to know.
I believe that we are still hard at work on all of the administrative guidelines. I don't believe that they are all published yet online. And I don't know the status of being able to publish them bit by bit. I know that we are working, or we are not, the administration is working through all of the administrative guidelines. And it's quite a large task. And so I don't believe that any of them are published online currently.
Okay, so I think before we adopt this, we should try to figure out some way to make a commitment, make it visible. What you read out loud, number 9 in the guidelines, which is
The
no
other thing that we
advertisement
could
shall promote any
consider
specific.
is- The other thing that we could consider is putting number 9 into the policy instead of the administrative guidelines.
Right,
It doesn't have to be separate there. It could be in the policy.
right. Either way works as far as I'm concerned.
Probably makes more sense to put into the policy rather than guidelines. Oh, I'm just saying it probably makes more sense to move it into the policy section instead of the guidelines.
Any other comments? Eric?
I would just echo, as I read through that, what Kevin had said, which is, I'm sorry, specifically about 7510 and the use of district premises. One of the lines says there will be no fee, and then a later line talks about the superintendent setting fees for usage of facilities. And my understanding is that historically, we've charged fees for some things and not for others, and maybe just making sure that we're really clear about how that's done and why.
So it's my understanding in 7510 that the paragraph that is under G is not related to G whatsoever. It is a separate paragraph that speaks about very specific kinds of meetings that shall be free of charge. Whereas some of the other, if you see under B, you have educational, recreational, social, and there may be charges for those. So what I'm hearing you say is that it's not clear enough that that paragraph right under G is a paragraph that stands alone, and that is what is without fee, and that the piece further on, referring to fees, refers to anything else that we charge fees for that's not in that paragraph. So am I hearing that we need to make that a little more clear?
I think it's easy to misconstrue the way that it's written there now. At
Yeah.
least I would misconstrue it.
I was going to say, if here we're interpreting it different ways, we definitely need to add some clarification and separation.
Okay. All right, well, I can work on that to bring it back for the second reading. If anyone has any suggestions, they can certainly get them to me and I can include those. Again, the board would read this again at the February meeting and that's when it would be adopted. Anything else on policies? If not, then we'll move on to Planning Commission. The discussion item says Planning Commission Neighborhood Survey, but I believe it's a total discussion of Planning Commission, and we had talked about there are 2 open positions, so perhaps if there's a report from Mrs. Washburn, Dr. Swetchnow, and then we can see if there's any action needed.
Yeah, I'll jump in here and talk about the Planning Commission some, since, as you said, we had 2 openings due to people resigning from their positions. At the last meeting, I said that I would go back through the applications and assess if there were candidates in there that I felt would contribute positively to the current members of the commission and would fit in nicely. And I think that we have found 2 who would be a great addition to the Planning Commission. And I've spoken to those individuals and they would happily join the commission and be part of that. So
Eileen, I'll jump in. There's kind of 2 other subtexts to that. One is one of the original concerns with the Planning Commission was that, and I'll use air quotes, that there was too much school representation and too much school parent representation and not enough community representation. So one of the things that we're looking at is adding additional members that improve the diversity of the commission. But what we've realized is that's kind of difficult. How do you identify those people and how do they show that their interest? So we're in the process of developing a plan to reach out to groups that maybe didn't hear those calls the first time around. So that's one part of it. And then the second part of it is there's a question about the Planning Commission's ability to post the information that they've produced for us onto the website. And specifically, there are, to my knowledge, 3 things. One was survey data that was obtained, I believe, from the Planning Commission communications group. One is salary data about the certified staff, and then in process, they're working on salary data for the administrative staff. And my expectation and plan is that that would be available through the website for anybody who wanted to review it. One of the concerns about the survey data was that it needs to be redacted in some way, or should it be redacted in some way, as it specifically mentions names of people. And I'm not sure that I have a great answer for that. It's something that I think that we need to discuss, and this would probably be an appropriate time to do it. But otherwise, I don't have any concerns in general about the Planning Commission's data being made public. I think that it should be. I think I just need to make sure that we're all on the same page for that.
I think that we had discussed that it should be made public after them presenting the information to us in some form, right?
I agree. I think that the question came up is exactly how does the information get presented to the board? The way that the operation seems to work at this point is that the Planning Commission sends its meeting schedule and its minutes, and I believe they go through Julie Dunn in the office and she posts those. And so that doesn't ever come to the board. We don't have to read the minutes and do that kind of thing. That gets posted. But both these reports that you're talking, well, I don't know about the salary data, whether that has any names on it or not, but I know that the community survey had some names. And so that was a question of generally when the district posts things on the website, it is carefully vetted. Any pictures that we post are students that have given permission, or parents have given permission for pictures. Anything that is posted with names, it's carefully considered that those names be published. And so it's a question of how does the material come to the board? Does the planning commission submit that to the superintendent and then it comes to a board meeting and the board looks at it? Or does the superintendent look at it as the board's representative and determine, yes, there's no names in this, it should just be published? So I think it's a process that we need to deal with so that it's clear happening in the future, so that there doesn't have to be a wait. There has been a time delay for this community survey data. I don't know that there's been a long time delay for the salary data, but there has been a time delay for the community survey data. And so we don't want that to happen to them in the future.
And I think that you perfectly described the troubles of bringing a new system that we've never had before. And sometimes you don't understand what the consequences of decisions are until you start seeing what happens. I've reviewed the survey data and I don't see anything that's proprietary as far as student names. I think that some of the questions were directed about what do you think about administration, or what do you think about particular people, or at least people gave that feedback. As far as I'm concerned, I think that the process that we have probably is best, through the superintendent and then fed to the board if the superintendent has any concerns that there might be something that's not appropriate, so that the board can decide that. And ultimately, I think the board's responsible for it. So as much as I don't need to vet everything that they do, if there's something that's controversial or concerning, I think it's important that we weigh that before we post it publicly, if that makes any sense. On the other hand, I don't feel that we need to review everything that they think should be posted.
What it does, the only thing that does is it adds another responsibility to the superintendent that I'm not sure is completely clearly defined. In other words, I don't want to put a superintendent in a position of, do I know what the board wants to see or not? That's the only question there.
What would you suggest as an alternative? Because I'm open.
I don't know that I do have an alternative. I did also look at the survey data and notice that it is, I believe it's mostly administrative names and board member names that are added. So I agree, it's not student information, it's not protected staff information, it's not addresses, it's things like that. I kind of think that if it includes names or anything that causes anyone to question it, I think it needs to come to the board, not the superintendent to make a decision. I think the superintendent can easily decide. Planning Commission created a survey and found out how many AP classes we have. That's something that they can publish, and they can publish people's opinions. We have too many AP classes, we don't have enough AP classes. If the survey comes through and we have too many AP classes and we should get rid of this one because we don't like this teacher, that is something else entirely, and that needs to be considered. So I don't have a good answer. I'm just trying to explain what the issue is, and I don't think that it should be the responsibility totally of even the superintendent's administrative assistant to decide what gets put up there.
Is it fair to say, based on your description of a possibly controversial topic versus a non-controversial topic, that it still would be good for the superintendent to be the first yes/no check? And then if the superintendent says, I'm in any way, shape, or form uncomfortable with this, I'm sorry, I'm tilted that way. As the superintendent is in any way, shape, or form uncomfortable with this, then it gets pushed to the board? Or is that still too much, I don't know, decision-making to ask?
Right. Well, I'm not saying it's too much decision-making. I'm just making the statement that it is, in fact, it is a task. I wonder if, do the board representatives to the Planning Commission feel comfortable
Yes.
reviewing material like this? And so they would be the ones to
too.
say this work product needs to be reviewed by the whole board, or this work product can be okayed at our level.
That
And then we
works.
can blame you.
Right, that works fine for me. I am happy to take any responsibility that anybody wishes to give me.
You are?
Kevin, you had a question.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. One is that if I'm still correct about this, they're the only quote unquote committee of the board that we have. And to me, that says that they, should have a very tight relationship with us. We should be interacting. We should be understanding what they're doing. I agree with you that we don't need to be necessarily telling them everything to do, but we should have interaction. And as a general rule, anything that, beyond minutes of their meetings that's fit to be published, I think is fit to be discussed with the board. And I would advocate for the PC president or somebody from the commission to come to our meetings on a regular basis and tell us, what's going on and what they're finding, and present something like this survey to us. And I would publish it after that, because I think we've just have an obligation to hear it, to see it. And we should do that first. I don't have a good reason for saying that we should do it first. I just think we should be doing it first. And of course, it's sunshine material. So it's in the public domain one way or another. So I do think it needs to get out there. So those are the thoughts that I have.
Well, let me respond to Kevin. Oh, that was great. Let me respond to Kevin. I think that your idea is probably much better than mine, because as much as I'm happy to take any responsibility, I think that asking a representative of the Planning Commission to come and give at least a brief presentation to the board about any work product that they've done that they think is important enough to be, posted, that's a great idea. So in an ongoing fashion, we can say to them, we would like you to come and present this information, and then we'll place it on the website. That makes a lot of sense to me. Does that make sense to everybody else? Michelle?
That was kind of my idea. I was going to suggest that we have a liaison from the Planning Commission, much like what we have the student representatives that come and report to us and are interactive with us, and that's how we get this going and being more productive and interacting with them. But I think we're all starting to head that way as that kind of a plan.
Okay, I'm hearing that we would then be asking the Planning Commission for regular attendance at board meetings, probably not every month, but a regular schedule of coming to board meetings, and particularly when they have work product that they would like published on the website. As Mr. Doherty said, it is public information, so it's not that we're concerned about keeping these reports from being published. It is a matter of what we publish on the district website has certain rules that it has to follow. So my only question would be at this point concerning the community survey, which has been submitted, is the board saying this evening that it can go ahead and be published? And should names that are in that survey be redacted?
I would just clarify with Kevin Hawley redaction rules and be consistent with those from my own perspective.
I was going to suggest that the names be redacted because a lot of people don't want their opinion associated with their name, and that might prevent them from answering a survey in the future. And that would be my fear.
Michelle, I think the names that we're referring to were not the people who responded to the survey, but rather the names that were mentioned in the survey. And I'm not sure anybody who's looked at the survey can correct me, but again, I believe that the names of the superintendent and the treasurer were mentioned, and names of at least one board member was mentioned. I don't know if there's more than one board member. I personally don't have a problem with my name being there, but if we're going to remove names, we should simply remove names. We could change it with superintendent, treasurer, board member, or we can leave the names. It's up to this board to decide. Again, it is not student information, it's not staff information, so I believe we have the right to say, leave the names or don't leave the names. But it is a question that was not, our superintendent and our superintendent's administrative assistant were not comfortable answering the question themselves.
Yeah, so just really, just to quickly answer the question, Mr. Doherty, purely from a records request, records retention standpoint, it's not necessarily something that is legally required to be redacted. So this is more a decision of the board whether or not to publicly redact the names.
Yeah, I just think well, maybe you are answering my question. My concern was that if we have law that we abide by in the redaction process for records requests, in the spirit of, why that law exists, we should apply it here. If you're simply saying that as a normal matter of course, school officials' names wouldn't be redacted from records requests, I would be, a proponent of respecting the people that contributed to the survey and not change their words. I.e., if the superintendent's name or your name or Kathy's name is in the document, as long as it doesn't violate, some sense of propriety, used respectfully, et cetera, then I'd have no issue with it being published.
Sure. I mean, I can basically just answer it from the factual standpoint. It's not necessarily, I'm not pushing one way or the other. Very neutral on it. It's just, if I'm answering the question, basically, administrator names are not legally required to be redacted from a document. It's more, I think it seems like what the discussion more is what the board desires to have posted on its website. So but from the pure treasurer, pure records individual, that's the legalities.
Well, just to give my 2 cents, I'm of the unvarnished truth mindset. As as painful as truth is sometimes, if this is the data that they collected and this is a public record at any rate, it's worth putting out. I'd say that this is a good, just like the technology question, this is a good learning process of how we gather information and how we present information. But to me, the easier and clearer and less questionable, the better.
I agree. And to go along with what Kevin was saying with consistency, if we're redacting student names and such, obviously for legal reasons, but not the other pieces, then we should leave it. I would just, obviously, nothing too bad there, but if we put out surveys, I would hope that people would be respectful and constructive in their feedback, especially when they do attach names.
Hey,
Okay, so I think what we have done is, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michelle.
has this survey that was taken, has it come to us yet? Because I have not seen it and it sounds like everyone else has.
It has come to us in a spreadsheet form, Michelle. It was a little difficult to read and we got a second version of it. It's got a lot of comments in it, so we have received it.
Okay, I sent you an email tonight saying when I opened mine, it double printed. So I have not been able to read it.
I don't think, I'm not sure if you're referring to the survey that we just got that was in the spreadsheet form. This came to us some time ago, I believe. But I can look for it and get it to you. It basically was the results of the community survey that the Planning Commission did and the responses that they got to questions.
Yeah, I've never seen that. So I'm not sure what happened.
Essentially what we've done at this meeting, I think, is create a lot of interest in this survey. But as they say, there's not good and bad publicity. There's only good publicity. So there you go. Anyway,
Kathy,
I think what I'm hearing from the board is to go ahead and publish this community survey data so we can give the go ahead to put that on the website. I'm not sure I heard the answer to the salary study. Is that data, has that been presented to the board?
That data has been presented to the Planning Commission representatives of the board, but has not been presented to the full board.
Okay.
And nor does it, in my mind, require a particular presentation. It's just, it's Kevin Hawley would like it because he's a numbers guy.
So it's just a presentation of data that has been gathered.
Correct.
So does the board see any reason that that also cannot be uploaded to the website?
I think it's probably a good idea to go ahead and upload that to the website. I also think it's a good idea to ask the Planning Commission, who's currently working on the similar survey for administrative data, that when they have that complete, to present both of those to us simultaneously.
I would agree with that. And just thank you to the Planning Commission for all of the work that they put into gathering that data and getting the survey results.
Okay, so we're all right with the publication on the website. Now the question is, are we ready to have a resolution to appoint 2 new Planning Commission members? And if so, before you make that motion, we need a motion to amend the agenda to add that to the agenda. But also I would ask a question that occurred to me as we were doing all this other discussion. Would these 2 members be appointed for 1-year terms or 2-year terms, or how does that work? What was missing? Do we know?
I can let Eileen answer, but essentially one of the members who stepped down had a 1-year term, and the other member who stepped down had a 3-year term. So we would be appointing them to those terms with the realization that the people that are being appointed aren't necessarily beholden to a 3-year term. And, you know, obviously anybody can step down at any point in time, but that is who has stepped down so far.
Okay.
So, yeah. Are you waiting for a resolution?
So I'm asking if the board is ready for a resolution. I saw Mr. Doherty waving his paper there, so he may have another question or he may have a question about these. So go ahead, Mr. Doherty.
Yeah, actually 2 things. The paper is the survey. And I was going to just suggest, Kathy, if you send Michelle what you sent me, Michelle, this was easily printable. I didn't have any issue printing it. So this version that Kathy has should work for you. And then moving on to the current topic, I'm a little unclear, and maybe Eric or Eileen could help me with this. The 2 individuals that we're talking about, okay, so let me put it as plainly as I can. There's been a concern that the Planning Commission kind of represents the school community bubble. And, you know, we haven't gone outside of it with the current membership of the Planning Commission. And I'm wondering whether we feel that these 2 individuals that Eileen has talked with satisfy that concern of kind of breaking the bubble and getting some other viewpoints, kind of the inclusion issue that Eric raised. I'm just unclear about what the outcome would be with these 2 individuals.
I believe that they would fill a gap. So although one does have children in the district, I think that if you remember from the last meeting, my goal in speaking to some of the candidates was to fill in some of the missing pieces from applications. So just from having conversations with people, I feel that they would be the best fit. Like I said, even though one does have children in the district, so they'd still fall under that parent umbrella, I felt that they had enough outside involvement that they were very diverse in the groups that they interact with.
And then Kevin, the second part of your question is really still outstanding. We have room to add 4 more people to the Planning Commission. It's challenging. It's challenging to ask somebody who's not been previously engaged with the schools to start doing work for the schools. And so we're really trying to figure out how to best identify somebody who can participate in a fashion in the planning commission that's helpful for both themselves and the planning commission, and yet has not been somebody who is intimately associated with the school. So we're working on that still.
And also for another point of clarification, Eric, you said that we have room for 4 more people. You mean by that the Planning Commission has indicated that they could use 4 more people. So just as a point of order, before we would add 4 more people, no matter the process that's decided on, we would also need to change the bylaws of the Planning Commission to add those 4. So by
Correct.
adding these 2, we are simply replacing people. And we went through applicants who had applied in the first round and had been
Correct.
through that first round.
Yeah, they were applicants who applied. They would just be replacing the 2 individuals who resigned. And then what the discussion has been is at the 1-year mark, reevaluating and look at the possibility of amending certain parts of the Constitution and bringing it to the board so they can add 4 additional members.
Okay, any other discussion or questions? Again, if we are to add those 2 this evening, we need first a motion to amend the agenda to add a resolution. Yes, we don't have a resolution for that. So we need a resolution to amend the agenda to add a resolution appointing those 2 members to the Planning Commission.
I would like to make a resolution to amend the agenda.
So Mrs. Washburn has moved to amend, and I see Ms. Pettit second. Any discussion about amending the agenda? Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Yes.
That was all yes, so that motion carries. So we are amending the agenda. Now it would be appropriate for a resolution to appoint, and we would name those folks to the Planning Commission. So Mrs. Washburn.
All right. I would like to put forward a resolution to appoint Leslie Hodge to the 1-year position on the Planning Commission and Anna Bunker to the 3-year opening on the Planning Commission.
Is there a second?
I would second.
Dr. Swetchenow has seconded. Any discussion? Any questions? Seeing none, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Motion carried. And so, Mrs. Washburn, will you inform them of that? And then the 2 of you, I assume, will inform the Planning Commission to get them added into their structure.
Yes. Eric, I'll reach out to the 2 individuals. Do you want to touch base with Donnell or do you want me to?
Thank you. All right, I think we're finished. If I'm reading my agenda correctly, I think we're finished the discussion items and some resolutions, and it's time to move to treasurer resolutions. Mr. Hawley, would you like us to make a motion for those items before you discuss them, or do you have a report for us before we discuss them?
You can make a motion and then I'll go through each of the
Okay,
particular topics.
so I am asking for a motion to approve treasurer items 6.1 through 6.12. I see Ms. Pettit. Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Everybody else is looking down at their computer. So I would just say one thing, Mr. Hawley, that's too many agenda items for tonight. Usually don't have that many. But if you would like to report on those items, and if we have any questions, we can go through
Thank you. I apologize.
them.
So just going through the items, 6.1 through 6.6 are Board of Education minutes. So you can see the minutes there, and that's pretty basic. If you go to 6.7, this is our typical financial reports. It's everything that we provide the board on a monthly basis. What will be a little bit different, this is what you typically see every January, is that we do provide 2 months worth. We don't typically have a business meeting, a board business meeting in December. So it is actually 2 months worth, excuse me, of financial packets, checks, all the information that we typically provide. What's important, I mean, I think it's kind of nice that you get 2 months worth, November, December. You can see some of the differences between the two without having to go backwards. One thing that I just wanted to point out to the board, in December, you will see some expenses potentially a little bit lower than maybe what you would relatively expect. It's not significantly lower, but what I wanted to go into is, as we've had many discussions over this past year, there was a grant that we did receive called the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and that grant was supposed to end on December 31st of 2020. It was extended beyond with the most recent stimulus package, but that was obviously pretty late in the December timeframe. We did have enough COVID expenses that we were able to actually utilize towards that grant. So we were very grateful for that grant. One of the pieces as to why you'll see a little bit more is schools weren't necessarily the only beneficiary of these grants. It was localities, cities, counties did receive them as well. And Hamilton and Claremont County late in the year did come to the district, and not just Loveland, but all the districts within the counties, and did state that they had some funds that they could appropriate towards school districts. So we were able to take advantage of a little bit more coronavirus relief funds than we had originally anticipated. So again, since that was late in the year, that's why you'll see December. Basically, if you're not familiar with how we do fund accounting, it's when we receive funds like this, it's a separate fund outside of our general fund. So we basically take expenses that were in our general fund originally, or potentially our PI fund, and we actually recode those towards the grant. So basically, it minimizes the expenses for that month. So that's why you'll see expenses a little bit lower, not necessarily revenue higher, but expenses lower. Again, that's just a good reminder too, when you look at the financial packets, this is our general fund. There are multiple funds within the district. Our main operating account is our general fund. That's what our 5-year forecast is based on. And that's where primarily tax dollars go to. So that's what we look at and that's what we track. And so this is also just a good point just to discuss a little bit about the state of Ohio and some of the economics. So obviously some of the funds that we receive in Loveland is from the state that is impacted by tax revenues, primarily sales and income tax revenues. And if you've been following along, the state did decrease Loveland's state funding by $1 million per year recently. So basically $2 million in total in revenue. We are currently in fiscal year 21, so about $1 million was deducted from our state funding in fiscal year 20, another $1 million in fiscal year 21. That was in anticipation of significantly decreased state tax revenues. Schools weren't the only area that were hit hard. I mean, you can read the news and see the other ways that the state was impacted by some budget cuts. But it's called OBM. It's the Ohio Bureau of Budget Management. They put out a report regularly, and the tax revenues that are coming in are significantly higher than what they had anticipated at this point. And so that is a relatively good news. I am on the Education and Finance Committee with the Ohio Association of School Business Officials. And there was a representative on the most recent call that did update us on this. The assumption at this point is that school districts will not necessarily be made whole for what they lost in fiscal year 20 or fiscal year 21. So why am I talking about this? Why this is important is because if you're not familiar with the state budgeting, it's a 2-year process. So every biennium, they put out a new budget. Again, similar to most things that we've discussed so far, it's not necessarily something that just impacts schools. It impacts the total state budget. We are at the end of the biennium at the end of fiscal year 21, which is the end of June of 2021. So this is the beginning of the process for discussions of the state budget moving forward for the next 2 years. The governor is supposed to put out some of his initial information by February 1st. So we might have some sort of an idea of what we may be expecting going forward. If you've been in schools as long as I have, and I know Dr. Lorenz, you have dealt with this as well, is even if they do put out some information in February, it's not unlikely that they don't necessarily have some sort of finalized budget until June, or even has gone into July. So we might have some preliminary information, but it's a long road still to see what's going to occur. I think we can all see with COVID-related things as well that this is still very flexible. There could be a lot that changes, but as of right now, the state is seeing revenue coming in significantly higher than what they had estimated, especially on the sales tax side. So that's just something that we continue to watch on a monthly basis. We are always watching it, but it's something that we're definitely much more focused on than typical. So that's just a bit on moving forward. Any questions on 6.7 financial packets? What I can say just really quickly on the financial packets, what you'll see is that we are still projecting. So these financial packets have been updated based on the new 5-year forecast that we did approve in November. We are still projecting where we had anticipated at this point. Obviously we've been 6 months, so you would tend to just look at the revenue and the expense side. It's 50%, and that would be your baseline. Revenue on the revenue side, because a little bit more of our revenue actually comes in from property taxes on the second half of the year. 47% is not atypical. So we're still anticipating to hit roughly what we expect. Looks like Mr. Doherty, you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple of observations and maybe one question. Kevin, there's a little bit of inconsistency at the header of the board minutes about whether we're stating they were live streamed or not. And they all, as my recollection is that they all were live streamed. And I thought we should say that, for example, the December 3rd doesn't indicate live streaming. It's small items, okay? But just observations in there. And then on the January 5th meeting, that was a virtual meeting, or at least some virtual, some in person, just for clarification on both of them. Just trying to get the minutes as, complete as we possibly can. And then on 6.9, I know we've talked about this, but the reimbursement rate for families that are not being offered transportation services, how do we set that and resolve that? Again, help me through that one.
Yeah, I can answer that. So I'm currently only on 6.7. So I will get to 6.9. Are there any? So I will definitely answer your question, Mr. Doherty, once I get to 6.9.
Okay, sorry.
I'm going to do 6.8 first, but are there any other questions on 6.7 at this present moment? Okay, great.
I see.
I'm sorry.
I do see Eric has a question.
Sorry, just to reiterate, because we've covered this before, and I didn't hear you specifically go through it on this occasion. Is it worth just giving a quick update on the tracking tool that you've used, which I'm looking at the financial packet for December is, I believe it was page 7 out of 9, the savings progress report.
Sure.
That looks very similar to what it has been previously, so it's not a question that I think didn't need a lot of thought from you, but I just wanted to bring it up that we are continuing to still track the amount of savings that we've made in conjunction with the goals that were set due to the previous failed operating levies.
Yeah, so let me, because there's a couple ones that we are tracking. I just want to be able to speak to it. Exactly which one you're talking about, Dr. Switch.
Right now, I'm looking at financial packet December, page 7 out of 9.
Yes, so this one in particular are the areas that we had discussed. So that kind of comes back to a little bit of the piece that Ms. Pettit discussed about Microsoft Office. So these are the stated areas that we had said that we would cut back on. When it comes to salaries and benefits, a lot of those were the original estimates that we had been looking at. So it does capture a little bit above and beyond from just the cuts that we had discussed. Because there's not necessarily an easy way to track each individual employee or position. But yes, we are still tracking it. The other one that we are tracking as well, which should be on page 6, was the commitment to decrease total expenses this year by roughly about $5.2 million. And there's an explanation on there as to what that really means. So you can see in December where we are currently, just a little bit above 3.2 million.
Perfect. That's really, I just wanted you to kind of make a nod to the fact that we're continuing to do that work and that information is available if anybody wants to look at it. But we've reached 3.1 out of a $4 million goal, which is greater than we had initially stated.
Correct.
Thanks. I just wanted to point that out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, so 6.8 is the official certificate. So what this is a form that is required by Hamilton County. We update it when there's any updates to budgets. Again, this encompasses all of our funds, so not necessarily just the general fund. So in particular, this mainly is our coronavirus relief fund additions. So this is just a basic updated budget. 6.9, so this is actually just the recipient list for what's called cash in lieu of transportation. There's a lot more information on the Ohio Department of Education if people are interested in it. Basically what this is these are families who have students in private schools where those particular routes, or it may not necessarily be routes, maybe there's one student who goes there, they're considered what they call impractical. And individuals in the district are able to receive funds by actually signing up for it. So there is a list here of individuals. What you'll see in the first sentence under the actual recommended action is that this is to be determined by the Ohio Department of Education. The Ohio Department of Education determines this on a yearly basis. They do give out a form. They basically say what's the minimum, what's the maximum that can be refunded back to people who have signed up for this. At this point in time, that amount has not been stated for fiscal year 21, or you could call it the school year 2021. So that's something that we're still waiting to see. That typically comes out a little bit later in the year. Does that answer your question, Mr. Doherty?
Partially. The rest of it is they give us a min and a max that we're constrained by. We have to determine what rate to apply to these individuals. So my question is, how do we go about determining what we're going to give individuals within the prescribed state range?
And to piggyback on his question, are we just approving tonight a blanket amount since the state hasn't given one, or?
Yeah, so I can answer that really quickly. So we are just approving the list of individuals who have signed up for it at this point in time. We are not approving an amount currently. So it has been a district process this is prior to my time, to do the minimum amount that is offered up by the Ohio Department of Education. I could do more research to see what other districts do. It is my understanding that most districts in the state of Ohio do also do the minimum amount. I don't have the number in front of me, but I do know the minimum was, I believe, $250. The maximum was $1,077 and some change. So it would be, in this particular case, we could look at what the total dollar amount is. If you look at the amount of names that are on the list, you're looking at the difference between it would be a $12,000 difference. So roughly $3,700 versus roughly about $16,000.
Yeah, so speaking as an individual board member, when we get on this topic, and my mind hasn't been here for a long time, but since it came up last year, I think about equity amongst our community. Everybody's paying X in taxes, or at least the same rate generally, and therefore some of our families are getting services that others aren't getting by virtue of their street address. And this to me would seem a way to help assure equity. I don't know what the numbers look like, what a family incurs to provide this transportation versus what we're saving, and whether we have limits imposed by law about whether the payment can vary from family to family, et cetera. But I don't want to overly complicate this thing, but I would like to, be sensitive to equity to the community on this. So the minimum, I'm not sure why as you say, we've done that for a very long time, why we do the minimum, why everybody does the minimum. Does that really make sense? I'm not sure it makes sense to me based on what I know so far.
Evan, what do you mean by there isn't equity, that there's
So-
potential?
So just say
Well, it's not equitable because of addresses.
Yeah, so where you live in the community determines whether it's viable for us to provide busing services to your family. And that's what I mean by addresses.
Kevin, just interject.
Mr. Ames, can you chime in on that
Sorry.
one for
Yeah,
us?
Kevin, I was part of the decision about busing and which routes needed to be cut, or actually we all were.
Right.
And it was done based on the number of students going to a particular school more than where people lived.
Well, and I would say, and Mr. Ames can speak to this as well, and maybe I'm just not hearing it correctly, is these are not necessarily students that are coming to our school district. These are students being transported to private schools.
My concern is that they're all taxpayers.
But the distance is the distance. The reason we're not transporting them is the distance for us to transport them to the particular private school, not based on their address in the community.
Well, okay. I'm not sure that.
We're not saying that if you live on this side of Loveland, we won't transport you to Seven Hills, but if you live on this side of Loveland, because your address is closer, we will transport you. So I think that's where the confusion in semantics possibly is coming in.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make it really clear that I wasn't necessarily arguing whether these were taxpayers or not taxpayers. What I was just trying to make as a point of clarification, the way that you stated it, Mr. Doherty, made it sound like these individuals were coming to our school. And I just want to make it really clear that these are students that are being transported to private schools.
Right, but if my understanding is correct, we have an obligation, a legal obligation, to provide these services where we can. And we're making a decision in these instances that we cannot do it for whatever reasons, which I'm not arguing with. But the equity to me is that not everybody gets to take advantage of public transport or our transportation services, our busing services. Not everybody gets the opportunity to do that. And Eileen, that's my issue of equity, that some people can and some people can't. But that's not reflected in the taxes that they pay. So I'm just advancing the argument that we should think about the algorithm by which we determine that people receive these payments.
Could I suggest, is this something that could be a question for the Finance Committee? That they look into some of this, what is typical for school districts? And I would simply answer the one question about some people can take advantage and some people can't. It's some people are able to be transported to a private school or a parochial school based on the distance of the school. So in other words, it's not too far. And then there is a law that states that you can determine what is not practicable to transport. And that is what allows people to go onto this list, that we cannot transport them in the amount of time that would be practicable for a Loveland bus to take them to wherever the private school is. So that's where the distance comes in. It's not that some people can take advantage and some people can't. It's totally dependent on which schools we're talking about and the distance they are to transport.
And again, the argument that I'm advancing is that if that was reflected in the taxes they pay, I wouldn't be talking right now. But I don't believe it is. And therefore, there is an issue of financial equity here.
So I agree with Kathy. Let's move this over to the financial committee and we can talk it over, and we can task Kevin Hawley or John with determining what other school districts have done so that we make sure that we're in line with, or we at least have the ability to be in line with other districts. And then we can talk further about how we want to proceed as a district. But we can do that in the finance committee.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
And let me clarify, this is for the 2021 school year. So these are, this is the current school year, and payment would be made at the end of school year. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's either April or May.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so the next one that we have on here is 6.10. It is change orders. So I'm going to turn over to Mr. Ames.
I assume my microphone, oh, turn it down. So I have two change orders for the board to consider. The first one is for $7,000, I believe $67. I don't have it in front of me. It is for four butterfly control valves on the cooling tower. Those valves were omitted and did not get picked up. So those were not part of the original bid. And the second one is for $330 just for a stack to remove the venting, the stack of the gas from the burners. I believe on the first one that I will be coming back to the board for a deduct change order. I feel it is correct to add those four valves on as changes and make that separate from the deduct that I will be coming back to you for probably next month. So just letting you know that I will most likely have a deduct cost for you.
Mr. Ames, I got the first part, talking about the two change orders that are listed, but that second statement that you made that you'd be coming back to the board, at least I didn't get it. There was too much
Yes, there's too much feedback.
reverberation.
Is this I'm not sure if I'm working correctly right now or not. Too much feedback? Is that better? Okay. Okay, so the cooling tower project, I believe I will be coming to you for a deduct in cost next month. It is some items that we need to I need to work through with the contractors to make sure that we are getting what we paid for, and they agree that there are some issues. So just want to make sure that it's not always a give. There will be some, hopefully, take. So
That we'll be happy to hear a deduct if you come back
I'm
with a
sure you will.
deduct. We don't have any problem with that, so.
Yeah, I never like to come with those change orders.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. The next one is 6.11. We did receive an anonymous donation in the amount of $2,000 to Loveland City Schools. And the last one that we have is 6.12, approve the Purdue Pharma bankruptcy resolution. So I did put some information in there. You can read the resolution back in July. So if you're familiar with Purdue Pharma, they were they created some opioids, and they're currently, there's been lots of class action lawsuits, but they're also currently going through bankruptcy. So there are claims that certain institutions or certain individuals are potentially able to put towards Purdue Pharma. School districts in the state of Ohio were approached by a law firm to potentially take part in this. And so we had stated that we would be a part of the bankruptcy claims. There is no cost to the district. The only way that there would be any payment to these attorneys is if there's actually payments or claims that are paid out towards the school districts. Whether or not that's going to occur, I have no idea. I just think it's more prudent financially to take part in something like this, where we may receive some funds back due to potentially higher special education costs or things like that. So we, back in July, stated that we'd be a part of it. They did ask for a resolution to be passed by the board, and so that's what we are presenting today. Any questions on that one? Okay, thank you.
Okay, any questions on any of Mr. Hawley's report or any of the items that we are considering? We do have a motion to, that has been moved and seconded to approve treasure items 6.1 through 6.12. I'm not seeing any other discussion being waived for, so Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Dr. Swetchenow?
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes,
Ms. Pettit?
Yes.
motion carried. I'm sorry. I don't push to mute, but it's muting. Again, was my mic on when I said the motion carried? Okay, sorry about that. We voted on treasure item 6.1 through 6.12. It was moved by Ms. Pettit, seconded by myself, and there was a roll call vote, and that was all unanimous, all yes, so that motion carried. We'll now move into Director of Human Resources, and there is a resolution for resignations and employment. I love to say this, so I get to say it again. Resignations and employment of certified, classified, homebound, substitute, and supplemental positions for the 2020-2021 school year. So is there a motion for those items? I see Mrs. Washburn. Do I see a second? Nobody wants to second motions. I see Ms. Pettit. So. Okay. Mr. Ogden, do you have a report for us other than these items are on the human resource agenda items are attached under the resolution in board docs?
I do not have any, whoa, I do not have anything else to add, but if I may steal maybe about 5 minutes of time, because if you look at within retirements, resignations, and leaves of absence, number one is our high school principal, Ms. Peggy Johnson. And I just kind of wanted to take a moment to not only share with the board that, but the amount of work that Ms. Johnson has put in with her time at Loveland. She's going to be ending about a 40-year career in the educational field. And, I would say in my 20 years of education, I don't know if I've met a more passionate administrative leader about students. You can't walk through Loveland High School without seeing Peggy high-fiving kids, or this year giving elbows. I could go up there, any one of us could go up there and ask, have you heard about this student in a high school of 1,400 kids? She goes, let me tell you about him, just real quick and matter of fact, because she knows every single student. She is well in tune with her staff. There isn't a sporting event, there isn't a drama event, a choir event, a music event, let's just say an event that Ms. Johnson isn't at, and tweeting and just putting stuff about kids. If you ask her to get in a photo to tweet out or to put out, she's like, oh, no, it's about the kids. And she really means that. So she's ending an amazing career. One that I know I don't want to speak for everybody, but that we are more than to say we're thankful at Loveland for her services is an understatement. I also wanted to share with the board that tomorrow we will be sending out an email to parents, an email to staff, and an email to students with some inquiry surveys about what they would like to see in their next high school principal. We look to post towards the end of January, spend February interviewing and vetting a replacement. And if everything aligns, we hope to come at the March 16th meeting with the next high school principal. But we will be incorporating, as I said, parent feedback, staff feedback, student feedback, and all those three groups will be included within the interview process as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ogden. And thank you, Mrs. Johnson, even though you're not here this evening. She often is here at board meetings because she's often got things to tell us about.
That was strategic.
Her high
I think
school.
she knew I was going to say something.
Yes. So, but I'm just saying that because we know of her passion. She's often here reporting on things to us. So we will be very sorry to see her go, but we'll be happy to have her have the retirement opportunity that she's looking forward to. And thanks for the report about the process for looking for a new high school principal. Are there any questions for Mr. Ogden concerning the human resources items?
Just a thank you to Peggy for all your service, and for the other retirees, thank you very much.
Anything else? It's one of the worst things about this virus. It has not allowed us to have, and maybe we will have a chance to honor Mrs. Johnson as things, hopefully after a few months, begin to clear up, but we have not been able to have the things. I know we didn't last year, to have the things to honor retirees and even to honor new employees who are coming into the district. So that's one of the things that we really have been missing over the
Sure, there are many staff and students who would love to celebrate her and her career. So hopefully we do get that opportunity.
I would also like to add that, to your point, Dr. Lorenz, one of the most difficult things from personnel side is that, to be quite honest, COVID has, I think, kind of made the decision for a lot of our professionals, whether it be at the beginning of the school year. We've had several retirees in the middle of the school year, and I'm sure we'll have more as we come to an end. Our goal at the district office is to, in some way, shape, or form, come up with a new and creative way to celebrate all of those individuals once we get closer to May, because Loveland speaks for itself. It's a great place to work. It's a great place to start your career, to maybe journey to during the middle of your career, and then definitely end a career. So we're working on creative ways to celebrate those people, to your point, to Ms. Washburn's point, and Mr. Doherty's point. So that is definitely on our goal once we get to May. So well noted.
Thank you very much. No other questions, or are there any questions or discussion? All right, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on those?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchner.
Yes.
And so that motion carries with regret concerning Mrs. John and any of the resignations or retirements, but motion did carry. The next item on our agenda is to consider a resolution to enter into executive session to consider the employment and compensation of a public employee or official. I would need a motion. You can see from the agenda that it is possible that there will be an agenda item after executive session. So I would ask for a motion to enter into executive session to consider the employment and compensation of a public official, employee or official. And I saw Mrs. Washburn wave her hand. Did I see Ms. Pettit as well? All right. So we have that motion. Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchner,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Motion carried. I have us heading into executive session at 8:09. We would be pausing this particular Zoom webinar meeting and moving into executive session in a separate Zoom meeting, and then we will come back to this meeting for any additional items and for adjournment of the meeting. Michelle's there, Kevin's there. Okay. Michelle, do we have you? Yes, okay. I didn't see your video, so I just wanted to be sure. I don't think we see a streaming because it's the Zoom webinar, so I believe we're back in. I will confirm that. Pardon? Okay, so we are back in the meeting. I'm waiting. Mr. Hawley, do we need to get you back in the meeting? I don't see you.
He's not showing in the panelist list.
The minutes will state that we returned from executive session at 9:35. What I'm waiting for at the moment is to make sure that we get Mr. Hawley back in the meeting. We appreciate the patience of our audience. Do we need to wait for Mr. Hawley to be? Yeah. I said 9:35.
Okay.
We've taken a minute or two to get all the technology figured out, but you are back in the meeting. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yes, I'm back.
I see you now. Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Thanks to our audience for their patience. At this time, coming out of executive session to consider the employment and compensation of a public employee or official, I would like to come back into our regular meeting, and I would like to make a motion to appoint Bradley Nevin to the position of interim superintendent for the Loveland City School District, pending contract negotiations. Is there a second to that motion? I see Mrs. Washburn. Everybody wants to second, so that's a good thing. And I would just make a note that Mr. Nevin is a retired superintendent. He was most recently with Vandalia Butler School District, and there will be more information forthcoming, and the board will need to approve a contract for Mr. Nevin. So that's why this motion is to appoint him as interim superintendent pending contract negotiations. Is there any discussion or any other comments to be made by the board?
I would
Mr. Doherty.
yes, I would just say to the community, and I'm talking about the school, staff, the students, the parents, the folks who don't have kids in the district, et cetera, the entire community. I feel very, very, very good about this gentleman. Deeply experienced in some of the kinds of issues that we all have been fighting our way through for some time now. And I think you're going to feel very good about this gentleman. I can't wait for you all to meet him.
Anything else from anyone? I do think we're anxious to get this in place, particularly to help our administrative team and make sure that Loveland keeps moving forward as we enter into a process of searching for a permanent superintendent for the district. So I think it is an exciting time for all of us. Okay, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Sweshino,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Motion carried. I don't believe there's any other business that needs to come before the board, so I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I
So
move.
moved.
Dr. Swetchenow moved. Michelle, you missed your chance, so I think Ms. Pettit is
I was
seconding.
delayed.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Did I hear an aye from Mr. Doherty? He doesn't want to adjourn.
I just wanted to say thank you to our other candidates. Very, very good candidates. A difficult decision for us, and our deepest gratitude to everybody that expressed interest
Okay,
in this
thank you.
position. So, and then I'm an aye.
And aye. Okay, so motion carried. I have us adjourned at 9:41.
Have a good night.
Thank you all.